Well,
Alrighty. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, David Streggy, and we have another uh, film that's coming from um, our good buddy Dane here for you tonight. So take it away, Dane, and tell us a little bit about uh, what the film is and
Blank it out,
what,
Dave.
Yeah.
what it means
So
personally to you.
this film is the second in our series for Meet the Cast month. At least my picks for it. And this we did the Diving Bell and the Butterfly for the pre-show, but then for this main show entry, we're doing a little obscure movie that I highly doubt any of you had seen before tonight, because nobody has ever seen this film, called Castaway, with Tom Hanks, directed by Robert Zemeckis, two very unknown actors. I think they might go places if more people saw their work.
I think you may have
but
known
yeah,
him
it's,
prior
it's-
in the indie scene as Tomahawk Hankerson. Okay? And he changed his name for the stage and the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. And, this is, I think this is his debut film here, isn't it?
It was Tom Hanks's attempt at a comeback. He was most known for Bosom Buddies. He was in a very harsh obscurity prior to this film. This was his attempt to be a big star. It was a cataclysmic failure, but we're here to bring it back.
And you can't forget the film's and introducing credit with Wilson the volleyball. I mean,
that's right. Well,
he obviously popularized the dad beard too, which took hold until the present day. So we are still in the furry tendrils of its grip.
Wilson was the first volleyball to win Best Supporting Actor, so that's our big as far as our volleyball diversity month pick. It definitely checks off that on the list. But no, in all seriousness, so Castaway was my pick. Partially it was because, well, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, for as much as I love it and as critically acclaimed as it was, most people haven't seen it, versus Castaway, which pretty much everybody and their mom has seen. It did insanely well at the box office. On a $90 million budget, it grossed $429.6 million in 2000 money, so that's probably in the billions in 2021 money. But anyway, it's a big movie. Everybody's seen it. It's on TV all the time. But I paired the two together because this is probably my favorite Robert Zemeckis film. Probably my favorite Tom Hanks film, which is saying a lot because he's got a massive repertoire of absolutely foundational modern classics. But this film, it goes with The Diving Bell and the Butterfly really nicely because, as I said before, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly is all about an internal conflict that is manifested, or the conflict is primarily internal, and here the conflict is external, but it prompts an internal change.
Very external.
So,
little assistance from some coconuts in that as well.
Absolutely. So they contrast with each other very nicely because, again, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, a man is a prison of his own body while still being in civilization. Here, a very able-bodied, very very good kind of survivalist guy, albeit all things considered, has a sailing certification and everything. This very able person trapped on an island for 4 years, and completely cut off from not just people but all living things, pretty much. So it's true isolation in the classical sense. So they're kind of polar opposites of each other in a lot of ways, but they both cover the theme of isolation and about an internal change having to take place because of some extraordinary circumstance, one on a small scale and one on a large scale. And so this is our large scale one.
I'm going to have to dispute your concept that he's cut off from all living things. There was all kinds of living things there.
Crabs,
Crabs, coconuts.
There were
trees, the plants.
Basically, what I'm saying is he doesn't have a cutesy animal side. What I'm saying.
True.
Yeah,
this isn't a Disney film.
Yeah, there are living things, but the best he's got are the trees, are the crabs, fish, and even those are pretty sparing.
Well, shit, bro. 4 years. I mean, you got a better job.
Yeah.
You got a better chance of like feeding a coconut than you do a friggin' golden retriever or whatever they do in those Disney movies.
Yeah,
I'm lost in the wilderness with just my jeans and my puffy vest and a golden retriever. Like I remember those movies.
Such detail. The puffy vest. Holy crap.
Nice.
Sign of the times, man.
But anyway,
they know Swiss Family Robinson, that's for sure.
Oh, that's a great film. Totally not this, but a great film. But yeah, so super fast synopsis for all two of you out there who have not seen this film. You got Tom Hanks as Chuck Nolan. He's a FedEx employee who flies around all over the world, overseeing the operations of different, FedEx branches to try to make them run at optimal efficiency. He's kind of a globetrotter in that way. And
That's
his
why it crashed.
plane,
It was FedEx.
yeah, his plane crashes in the ocean in the middle of the Pacific, and he is stranded on a totally deserted island, presumably south of the Cook Islands, which I don't think that there is an official island there, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was, because there are all kinds of very teeny tiny little islands sprinkled all throughout the Pacific, especially where they said the Cook Islands, and they actually filmed in Fiji. So I mean, they're definitely in the ballpark, of where that island would be, or an island like that where it would be. But he gets stranded there for 4 years and has to learn to survive. But in the midst of not just staying alive every day, it's all about trying to find hope in the midst of an utterly hopeless situation and all of the mental gymnastics that one has to go through in order to get there. So that's on a very simple level what it's all about. But again, totally not an unheard of movie whatsoever. All of you, I'm sure, have probably seen this film before. I'd be shocked if you hadn't. So let's just go ahead and talk about what we thought about this film when we saw it. Let's start with our guest, Mr. Roger, who remind me who invited you. Was that Mo?
I think it was SeptumSin.
Oh, thank you. Yes. But let's start with Roger, because you're the guest of honor. What were your first impressions about this totally obscure film that nobody's ever seen before?
Well, it's an honor, but believe it or not, I have never watched Castaway until now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I might probably.
We found one of the two. The other one's fucking Wilson, because he lived it.
You totally disproved my thesis.
Well, it's all big, so that might count for something. But I went to another movie I didn't know anything about. I was apprehensive about it because I just didn't know anything about it. But when I watched it, I was surprisingly impressed with it. Most of the movie, I was really entertained. There's some parts at the end was kind of flatline. But I tell you what, the beginning of it was really interesting. The airplane crash was really interesting. It hit me right in the face. You go to the part where when he's on the island, and then a real kind of like interesting ending. So I really liked it.
Awesome. Forrest, what'd you think of this film?
This was my first time watching it in 20 years. Last time I saw it was on VHS.
Yeah.
At my aunt's house.
I'm surprised because this movie's on TV like all the time, and I watched it on TV all the time.
Dude, most of us are under 40 though. We don't fucking have. What are you doing, you weirdo? You have cable?
Well, no. When I was a kid, this thing was on TV all the time, and it was like every time it was on, it was like you have it on in the background. You where is he on the island now? When is he ever gonna get off that island?
See,
Oh,
that was
Gilligan.
more like when I was a kid, and the movie, and he references Gilligan's Island on here.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
more like that.
Yes, I did watch my fair share of Gilligan's Island.
Giggles Island. We're lost in
Giggles
deep.
Island.
Commence to giggling. You know.
This isn't Family Guy. It's not Giggity Island.
Anyway,
This is
but yeah,
amazing.
I mean, it's not my first time watching it, but it is my first time watching it in 20 years. I will say, and this is actually the very first. I know Forrest Gump was the first Hanks Zemeckis collaboration, but this was actually my first. But I actually saw this. But this was actually my first Hanks Zemeckis collaboration that I saw.
Yeah.
What?
I saw this before Forrest Gump too.
Yeah, because
Wow.
for me, because that damn title, I avoided that movie I avoided Forrest Gump for years.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
didn't watch it until
But again,
just a couple of
Dude,
years
but
ago.
strangely
so-
enough, true fact, the first time that I saw Forrest Gump was the same night that I saw The Elephant Man for the first time. Because my
Oh,
parents had
God.
reserved Forrest Gump, and I was like, I'm a weird little fucker, so I'm going to rent Elephant Man. And, that's how that happened.
Wow, that's a shocker.
Both fantastic films, so I mean, you got served pretty well.
Not a double feature I'll ever revisit, but they are intrinsically linked.
Anyway,
You could do a lot worse.
Ah,
anyway, yeah, I think this. I think this is a very good, great, excellent film. Fantastic. It's technically well made as well as extremely well acted. It is kind of slow, but but at the same time, it's not boring. There's never a dull moment. And it's interesting to see how Hanks adapts to his situation, and devising and how surviving and just trying to get off this island. And also kind of I don't know, maybe just because I've been because I live alone and I've pretty much been in isolation for the last year or so with the pandemic, but no roommates or anything. So seeing him adapt and trying to all he's got really no one but himself.
Again, another important emotion that I think all of us got to experience, but I think that a lot of us should have probably experienced more of prior to the pandemic, so that way we would have been ready for it. But that's another story. But yeah, it is definitely something that I imagine a lot of us can relate to, perhaps a little bit more than we could have in years past. What about Brandon? What did you think?
well, it'll make you feel better to know. No, that's not my first time watching this film. I want to say I did not see it when it was in theaters, but I know I saw it shortly after it came out on DVD, because I remember getting it in the full screen version, which is sad because I guess I should upgrade one day. But I think it's the first time I've seen it on a big screen TV, actually. So this is a interesting thing, seeing it in higher definition, and it is fun to revisit. I never thought it was that much of a melancholy film. It was more melancholy than I remembered it to be, but not nearly as melancholy as, say, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. Slightly less so than that. And with that being said, I thought it was well acted, well done, and a good story to boot. Not a fun film, but a good film.
And what about Dave? What'd you think?
This is not my first time watching this. I actually saw this in the theaters back when it came out. So I remember sitting through it. I feel the same way I felt about seeing Swiss Army Man
Dave, you're going for the
think of
weird
this,
connections tonight.
When I think of films that have to do with each other, but the thing is, this is Robinson Crusoe without Robinson Crusoe meeting the pretty natives. You know, basically. I mean, it's the Swiss Family Robinson movie without the family or the natives. You know, I mean,
I'd prefer not to think of old Tom Hizzle and Wilson as Mr. and Mrs. Robinson because he was there for 40 years.
Robinson Crusoe on Mars.
Well, it is not an accident. It's not an accident that the volleyball is a Wilson brand volleyball.
The thing is, Robert Zemeckis, that's the director of this, right?
Right.
Yes, Robert.
He must have really loved Elvis at that point in time because there was Elvis playing in the very beginning. There was Elvis. He gave an Elvis CD to the little kid.
And Forrest Gump as well.
And I believe Blue Christmas was playing.
Oh, yeah. All over the place. Return to Sender at the end.
Return to Sender in the end. It's like I had been Elvised out. I'm sorry.
You can never be Elvised out. It's impossible.
Yes, I can. Because my fiance, one of her favorite film actors is Elvis. And
why?
She loves watching them, and maybe it's because of her connection with her mother, and her mother was really big on Elvis. So oftentimes I end up having to sit through watching Elvis movies. So
Honeymoon in Vegas is Elvis out.
Yeah, that was a Elvis heavy.
There, you can be Elvised out. Trust
2,000 miles of wasteland.
You can be pelvised out. That's
Bubba Hotep.
Is that what the kids are calling it nowadays?
Those are Elvis homages. They're not actual Elvis movies, but we'll have to we should do an Elvis month at some point. That'd be kind of fun. But Jake, what about you?
Okay. I also am not coming to this one for the first time. I cannot for the life of me remember if I saw it in theaters. I cannot. Strangely enough, a fun bit of trivia about this is I knew a lot about this film when it came out. I definitely heard a lot about it. And one of the things they made a big to-do about was that they stopped filming for like 4 months where Tom Hanks dropped a ton of weight and grew out that huge bushy beard. While meanwhile, Robert Zemeckis was making another film, a little movie called What Lies Beneath, that I actually did see in theaters and thoroughly enjoyed. And actually, I do have that on VHS, but I don't think I have either of these on DVDs, sadly. I need to do that. I need to fix that. But I always thought that one was underrated. It was it's rare to see Harrison Ford give a performance that impresses me, and that was one that he did.
I know I've done this movie on a double feature with The Beach. So,
The Beach?
The Beach and Castaway are put together
Slightly
in a
different.
collection.
Slightly different film, but a good one. But actually, I think in the last discussion we talked about like video game crossover with movie, and The Beach had a scene that was a video game sequence, didn't it?
Yes, where he's collecting the coins.
Right. But but this is one that I liked it. I liked it a lot. I was amused by it. I'd forgotten how long it was, but it's a solid Tom Hanks performance. I still want to know what he did to piss off the Academy, because this was the last nomination he got until he played Mr. Rogers, and it was like, what? he was their boy for a decade, and then they just stopped calling. And I don't know why.
Actors are.
He showed up to the Academy Awards with Wilson. That's what it was.
As his date.
Well, at least I can say Eddie Murphy gave them good reason not to come back.
Well, exactly. And then one more random thing I just want to throw out real quick. We mentioned in the Diving Bell and the Butterfly, the kind of you could draw some interesting parallels between the two movies using another medium. In that case, the sessions. Another way you can draw parallels between the two movies is with Forrest Gump. Yeah. Because I have read the book by Winston Groom, and it has a lot of shades of Diving Bell and the Butterfly. That Forrest Gump in the book is furious at his inability to communicate properly with the world.
Yeah.
And it's actually a much more difficult book to read than you would ever think from watching the movie. But
it's a very different story. It's a good book for what it is, but it's not the same story.
Right. But anyway,
now, Mo, you were talking about that dad beard, so I'm sure you got some juicy bits to say about this movie.
Oh, dude, I mean, it's you know, not for nothing. I think you're onto something with the whole like volleyball first time thing, because I'm sure this has to be the first time a volleyball was ever licensed with like a movie. You know, because you could buy Wilson at Walmart for a while.
Well, okay, it's actually funny.
Yeah, I did have. I actually did have one of those Wilson volleyballs.
I very seriously doubt they were like putting out volleyballs with the fucking Top Gun logo on them. So it seems more likely that this was the first one. Yeah.
But funny thing about this though, so there was actually no product placement in this film at all. Like in other words, like they didn't specifically talk to brands to like have them pay to have their logos in there. They didn't do that actually. What they did was they talked to. Well, here's what happened. They talked to FedEx and they just asked, can we use your logo in our film? And they talked it over and they said yes. So it was not like a formal product placement type scenario. And I think same thing with Wilson, because Wilson's
it makes
a company.
The most sense, though.
Well, Wilson's the company that makes predominantly soccer balls, and they did make a volleyball, and it was just because it was plain old white, and they could, have the handprint and all that stuff. But it was not a terribly popular product of theirs. They did make it, but it wasn't terribly popular. But again, that was not a product placement type thing. It was just something that they wanted a person's name to be the product, and for him to get the idea that way.
Serendipitous or whatever, it just happened.
And also, again, it's not an accident.
Don't sleep on those. I've owned 2 pairs of Wilson hockey gloves. I'm probably one of 100 people in the States to buy them because I was playing roller hockey at the time, and they make a good set of gloves. So.
And
nice
a tennis
catches.
ball too.
Yeah, there you go.
I was going to say again, is also on the use of the Wilson one. Again, it wasn't an accident. His wife's name is Rita Wilson, so it gave it a little bit of a poignancy when he's crying Wilson or whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anyways, that stuff aside, definitely saw this in the theater with my little brother. We were like those first people for sure that were like yelling Wilson every time that we lost something for a little bit after seeing this, I don't remember if my parents took us to it or we just decided to go. But I always thought it was rad, man, because I've always like really had a soft spot in my heart for survival stories like that. I've recently been revisiting shit like that. Like I'm 3/4 of the way through reading Hatchet. I only have like a couple of chapters left, but I've been like trying to save those because I've been loving just revisiting it. Got My Side of the Mountain waiting on the side. As a kid I was always big on like Lord of the Flies.
Does anybody remember Hatchet?
Yeah, that's what I was just saying, dude. I'm reading it. Like I rebought the 30th anniversary edition. It's amazing, by the way. Feels like it's leather bound. It's water resistant.
There was
so
a
you
movie.
Could presumably survive a plane crash with that book in your back pocket.
I thought there was a movie based on the Hatchet too. it vaguely is familiar.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it got one
Number
side of
three.
my side of the mountain, I think.
There were 3
And it's-
movies based on Hatchet. They all...
It's like,
I'm not talking about that Hatchet.
Yeah, not Adam Green's Hatchet.
Actually, there were 4 of them, so yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a
But,
5th one, Victor Crowley, too, isn't there?
Yeah, Victor
Well,
Crowley.
that's the fourth one.
Oh, that is the 4th one. Okay,
hmm.
my
Yeah.
bad. I'm more familiar with the novel that we're actually talking about. You know, it really is like, you know, survival movies and shit like that has always been a thing for me. You know, the Robinson or the Swiss Family Robinson shit, all that stuff. So Castaway was a natural. You know, immediately we loved it when we got it on VHS. We used to watch it all the time. It was probably the last Tom Hanks movie that I watched repeatedly, other than The Terminal, which is another movie about him being stranded in slightly different circumstances. You know,
Yeah.
and then I think he got stranded on a ship with some pirates. So Tom Hanks was just getting stranded out there for a while.
I know. What
Yeah.
the hell, Tom? Get a hold of yourself.
But I always really like this movie, man. It's satisfying. It's got those moments that tug at your heartstrings. You know, there's coconuts, there's crabs, an ice skate, and a pretty sweet volleyball. So I have nothing bad to say about it.
Yeah. Well, I saw this film not in the theater, but when it first came out on VHS, and they had that blockbuster promo with the antenna ball, which
Yeah. Holy shit! I kind of almost forgot about that antenna ball until you just said it.
It's probably in like my parents' attic someplace. I looked for it on eBay just now, and they go for like $120.
They were
Like,
giving you
yeah,
those a
deal.
lot for a while there. Like you'd go to like some random fucking place and they'd just give you a tennis ball. Or Jack in the Box was like the most egregious
Yeah.
one. Like, they'd always be giving them to you. I
for the
collected them
antenna
for a bit.
balls. Well, but the point is, like, so I saw it when it first came out on VHS. That would have been like early 2001, so I would have been like 9 or 10,
Roundabouts.
something like that. And so I saw this movie pretty young. But to be fair, I think you could show a kid this and you'd be fine.
Yeah, they're good.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a few, like, you know, cover your eyes moments when you're a little kid, but like other than that,
fuck 'em.
you could
Fuck
probably
them kids.
you
Let
could show
them learn the hard way.
but you could
Follow with Diving Bell and the Butterfly. Yeah, that way you got them prepared.
yeah, there you go. But I think you could show a kid this, and they would get just as much out of it as the adults would, which I think that's one of the joys
For
of
sure.
like. You could show a kid this at a younger age than I think you necessarily could even Forrest Gump, which I saw when it had its network television premiere back in 2004. That's when I saw it. So I was a little bit older, but like. And that one has a little bit more complexity in terms of like the politics and the this and that. But like this one's a bit more kind of not to say that Forrest Gump isn't universal, but like this one is even more so. And I think again, if you saw this as a kid like I did, then you could get just as much out of it. But I saw it when I was young, and it made a huge impact on me even then. As I've gotten older, it has left even more of an impact on me, especially when having dealt with a lot of loss in my life and isolation and that kind of stuff, even before the pandemic. But like it was a movie that really struck a major chord with me from a very early age. I was always a big Tom Hanks fan during his golden period, as was everybody on planet Earth, of course. But I think honestly, I think this is his crowning glory, which is saying a lot relative to all the other films he's done. I mean, I think that he is essentially playing the same kind of person that he usually plays, but like it's the best version of that versus like Forrest Gump, where like he really embodies that character, who is such a unique character. But like here, as far as like the Tom Hanks part or whatever, like he does it the best that he ever did it. And I think that there's just so much to talk about as far as like the fact that he, despite being a very capable person, like he's good at his job, he knows how to handle himself in the civilized world and in the not civilized world, because there are all kinds of small visual clues that we get. Like we see like the fact that he does have a boating certification. He does have a Swiss Army knife on him. He knows how to keep track of time even when he doesn't have a working clock, and just all these things that, he's pretty well equipped to handle this particular situation, but it's still extremely difficult. And the film is all about being, he has extraordinary gifts to deal with his situation, but he has many, many, many things taken away from him while he's on the island. And then, it's all about the phrase, the Lord giveth and taketh away. That whole thing rang pretty true in this, because for everything that's given to him, something else is taken, until again the chaff is burned away and you get a more refined person who frees himself from the frivolities of the world, which, to be fair, that was never really that much of a burden for him in the way that it was for the protagonist of The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. But go ahead.
I would disagree, because I would make the point that I don't think anyone has made yet, that I see Nolan at the beginning of the film as an absolute slave to the clock. He is an absolute slave to time.
Yeah.
And he believe, that's his thing. That's like his MO at the company, is like, he's always like harping on time, like faster, 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 faster. But like,
stole that bicycle.
But he's
exactly.
Well, he's a slave to time in the civilized corporate conception of time, shall we say?
They're doing that Joe versus the volcano shit, except like more refined.
Well, but what's interesting though, like, because you bring it up, because what's interesting is he does not commit the sin of turning his back on time even when he is on the island, but he's doing it in service of something greater, which is his own survival, as opposed to, and he never really came across as a corporate clock puncher necessarily, even though he was extremely punctual about everything. But it's like, it's for a different purpose. He's doing it in service of survival, and not just trying to maximize efficiency and that kind of stuff.
I think it was last week. It was recently that our conversation turned to that whole idea of one bad day, and and one and this guy reminds me of, like, if he had one bad day, he would become the clock king, basically. He's that high strung. I will admit, he adapts remarkably well once he's on the island. He does a really good job of it. But he really is. I found him kind of unlikable at first, because he's such a hard ass when it comes to time. He rides his employees pretty harshly for that. So that was something he really had to do some soul searching about, and I think he did. To his credit, he did a lot.
In some sense, though, that was to his benefit in that situation, because when you read or watch other survival stuff, one of the first things that kind of drives them a little mad is not having that sense of time, not having that sense of a schedule of things that they need to do, because when it's easy to just be there and be like, I'm in shock because the fucking plane just crashed. And like, I'm gonna just go ahead and wander around and then lose 12 hours and then wake up in the middle of the day, and then it just starts like a vicious cycle.
Well, you are right that in other, like, with real survivalist types of people and people who live through extreme circumstances, I think one of the things they tell you is that it's even more of a mental exercise than even a physical one, because you can kind of be subject to kind of the existential void and the hopelessness and the even just losing track of time and of schedules and that kind of stuff.
In Hatchet, the kid is in there for like 55 days, and it's like the first 10 days that are the worst for that, because you're thinking that whole time of like, am I going to be saved? I don't have all these like comforts of home. Is anybody even looking for me? It's once you hit that point where you like realize, okay, that all might be a question mark, but I've got to survive regardless. That's where the real shit kicks in.
Basically, what that tells you is that we humans, we are still kind of small-minded creatures, and we have to take very ginormously large concepts of like, how do I fit into the grand scheme of things when I don't have my, creature comforts and, basic necessities. They have to whittle it down to, okay, just get through today, find food, find shelter. And that's how, they get through it all.
No, dude, if I crash a plane, I'm for sure pissed that my sweater is soggy and that like my watch is. I'm ripping that sweater off and whipping it against one of those fucking palm trees, and I'm like, "Fuck this!" There's going to be a good hour of that before my mind even tells me that I'm not going to get an Uber out of there.
And he does go through that stage of like thinking he'll be saved, and obviously it doesn't quite get there. Now, Roger, you're trying to say something?
Yeah, actually, I found it pretty interesting that the character Chuck, he never did lost his apprehension of losing time, because he did have a monthly planner, when it was tracking time with a pretty if you've seen those old documentaries, how they got some monuments have peepholes that let sunshine through, and they would hit a point on a stone or something else to. It's pretty much a pretty remarkable piece of engineering for a guy to keep cognizance of his time. He still keeps his timepiece. So actually, this movie did take a lot away from him, but he never did let go of his obsession to keep time and have something uptime on him at all times, because he felt the movie.
Well, and actually, what's so cool, kind of jumping on that point. What's so cool about the film is, as he gets on the island, he does kind of have to somewhat regress into like a more, survivalist mindset, but even more so like a kind of caveman-like mindset, because he has to do a lot of what our ancient ancestors had to do, which was discover fire and learn to keep track of the seasons, even with the kind of flawed concepts of time that were there in the ancient world. They still had to keep track of it. Like they had to keep track of monsoon season if they were like in what's now modern India, for example. Yeah, they had to keep track of that. They had to keep track of when did the floods come on the Nile to plant crops, when to reap the crops, all that stuff. They had to keep track of all that, and he has to do that based on the ocean breezes. And you see the drawing of the kind of primitive sailors timekeeping chart on the cave wall and stuff like that, which we are getting ahead of ourselves. But it's really interesting stuff. And I think with your point, Jake, there with because I always, even when I was a kid, partially because Tom Hanks just does such a good job of playing the character, I always really liked Chuck Nolan, even when he is kind of really full on in his day job, just because he's very intense, but he also seems to be very, very, very competent at what he's doing. He doesn't he's intense, but he's not like being malicious per se. Like he's just reinforcing the fact that in less than 15, less than 3 hours now that we have these packages have to be sorted and on its way to the airport. That whole thing. Like I think I don't know. I can get that way when I'm in a situation that's time sensitive. I can I don't try to ever make people feel horrible about it, but I just I emphasize that these things need to happen at a very specific time.
That is a good point, because I'm kind of like that too. Like I prize efficiency at work, and people who actually can do what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it, and in the way that makes sense and whatever. So I appreciate his working style, but I also don't, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I understand it, but I don't really like it. It's kind of,
he doesn't bully people though, and he doesn't make them, he doesn't pass blame. He just emphasizes urgency, which that's a whole other thing than doing, because if he were to actually bully people, then he really would be unlikable.
Yeah,
and there were some earlier drafts of the script where they were trying to say, oh, he and Helen Hunt were fighting all the time, or oh, he had an estranged brother, or all these kind of artificial classical movie sources of conflict before he gets on the island, all that stuff. They stripped that away to just get to the essence of what it would be like if just a person were to be on this island and what all you would go through. And I think that was really smart, because otherwise you could run the risk of running into artifice. Now,
Right.
Roger was trying to say something.
Oh, I simply wanted to say that he was actually he wasn't the bad guy at all. He was, every time he was complaining about time, he was really complaining about the packages making to the persons that was going to be receiving the present on a reasonable period of time.
Yeah,
Because he
yeah.
wasn't just being mean as shouting at people,
Right.
saying, "Well, sure, he was kind of a jerk, but he was being, of course, he was doing his job, make sure that that packages could flow smoothly." In the middle of Russia, and no place where capitalism is not appreciated at all, he still was trying to make something happen. So I thought it was a really strong part of his character, that he was concerned about other people, and I thought the film, he was definitely concerned about about the packages, about the feeling of the package. He was talking about it quite a bit. This package is going to a grandfather somewhere. This is going to a toy or whatever it is. But he was cognizant about the customers that was receiving the packages, since they were just not just packages that's coming on in. We can lose a package. Who cares? He was just the opposite. That actually was kind of refreshing to see somebody really care about.
Especially after this last year.
It's
no.
let me tell you, okay, as someone who works in the mail industry, I work for the postal service. It's no joke. You have to have somebody like that on site. That's like, dude, this shit has to be efficient, has to be on time, because there's the mentality of, like, I really do care about my job, but I also care more about just getting the stuff in the box. But some of the shit is time sensitive. You know, like you're delivering medication or different things.
You gotta love the two bits that must have registered with you then was where he mailed a clock to himself, partially to make a point, but also it's like he and of course he's the kind of guy who would do something like that, and he also puts it in this oversized box, which I'm sure is also partially to make it delayed even more, just to see how much that would delay it, if it wasn't an oversized box. But like the part that must have resonated with you is like, what if it was something important like your paycheck or medications or something? And then the other thing was the truck was 5 minutes late, and then tomorrow it'll be 10 minutes late, and then 15 minutes late, and then before you know it, we're the U.S. mail. And
I mean, they do a really good job of making it seem in this movie too, like FedEx doesn't fucking show up and dump literally hundreds of packages on each of us as individuals every day. Because we have a last mile contract with FedEx and have for years, which that part of it kind of infuriated me a little bit, because it's like, what? I mean, there's days where literally, dude, I'm at work, I've already sorted an entire neighborhood worth of mail and gotten all my parcels sorted and everything in a mail truck that's not that or a mail van that's not that big. And then FedEx shows up, and it's like your heart sinks, because that means you have to go do all of that shit and then come back and take out the FedEx. UPS does it too. They contract the last mile to like rural carriers. So most of the time when your parcel shows up like in a neighborhood from one of those companies, they didn't actually deliver it. It's your mailman that fucking got it thrown on his ass, So that part of it bumped me out a little bit, but without getting too into that aside, yes, efficiency is a big thing with it. You'd be surprised the amount of motherfuckers
FedEx plays ding dong ditch with us. So
they don't take it seriously, man. I mean, when I deliver people's packages, it's very much in the forefront of my mind that is not their mail, So having like that package like he had to deliver at the end of the movie would have probably
that's a
been a thing
classic
for
scene.
me. Like if I found that one pristine package, I would have been like, yes.
Well, you gotta love the fact that the movie, it opens up in an unusual way, because it does kind of start at the location where the film will ultimately end. Spoilers, but it gets us to Russia via FedEx package with the package cam shot, which is awesome. But it gets us there. And then
those package cam shots were kind of weird, but that was more like, I gotta say, when Dave was talking about Hardcore Henry, I was sitting there thinking that scene in Castaway reminded me more.
Well, or I was gonna say Requiem for a Dream because they had the
Yeah.
body cams there for
Oh
that.
yeah, true.
But that was the same year too. But anyway, so it gets us to Russia. That's where he has his whole big thing about time. Which honestly, that whole opening speech of his about time, I think that does an amazing job of setting up Chuck Nolan as a character because he's delivering it with all the passion of almost like a preacher. Because like he really does believe, like you can say he's a slave to time, which probably in the corporate sense of that perhaps, but he really sets up what the central conflict of the film is, which is even more so than man versus nature, but it's essentially man versus time versus the inevitable versus that which we can't control, and it's all about him he's in a job where he has to be a maestro of chaos, because chaos is unfolding all around him. He has to deal with it as it unfolds and have backup plans upon backup plans to deal with it. He's good at his job. He's in control in this otherwise very hectic environment. And, you can expand time in that definition of it to, that which you can't control. By all means, he is in control of his environment more or less. And yet he is someone who, despite being very competent in civilization and more or less outside of it, that he gets so much of it torn away from him, and so he has to build it back up again. And that's a very important thing.
It gives him a structure to work in, and it it also, the whole thing with the package shows that he's like a man of his principles. He really cares about getting this stuff to the people. It's not just about time. It's not just about efficiency. It's about also delivering a product
to the people.
Exactly. Like, I might not seem like it, but I'm a man of principles. Okay.
Yeah.
If I was fucking stranded, like if I somehow flipped my fucking mail van and ended up on a desert island and I found that package, like for sure I'm taking that.
It's an impressive
It'd
flip.
be one of those little things, right? It'd be one of those things that you'd anchor onto, I think,
Well,
much like the time, the whole concept of that.
Well, the point is, which you touched on this, but the point is that he does root himself in something that is, it is important. It affects all of us. Our lives are measured by time, ultimately. He does root himself in that, but again, it's in a kind of corporatized sense of the term. So he does kind of get a slight redefinition of it, but it's his having a structure and a rooting in something meaningful that does ultimately get him through it, even more so than the love of a woman, which is a very powerful force as well. But
that gets you through some lonely nights on the island too.
It most definitely does. Most
That's what I
definitely
needed
does.
Wilson for.
Yeah. Why do you think Wilson had a hole in him?
Oh god.
Oh man, that'd be a whole other movie, but which probably exists, I'm sure, at least in the realm of erotic fan fiction.
It
but
exists, dude.
I am sure.
To.
But the point is that it helps to set him up, and just thematically, it helps make the themes very clear. In a way that you don't even realize that that's what it's doing, but it's very masterful at doing that. A detail that again, there are certain details about his character and just things like that that are set up visually and very subtly, like the fact that he does have a boating, a sailing certification and that kind of stuff. He seems to have some skills in certain areas that are going to serve him well, even though it's still incredibly challenging. He has some of the right stuff to make it through, to where you could believe a guy with his constitution could at the very least stick it out for as long as he did, let alone actually get off the island. But a detail that I did not pick up on until this latest viewing was the fact that Helen Hunt, Kelly Frears, his fiance, or his girlfriend that he proposes to, and then just leaves her with the ring, before he leaves. But she is studying to be a doctor of studying frogs, it looks like, which I never picked up on that until this time. But so I think that's an important factor in the sense that it connects him thematically to life and frogs as animals. They are essential to measuring the health of an ecosystem. No frogs, your ecosystem is probably either really harsh or unhealthy. Obviously, no frogs on a desert island, and she's not there
Right.
except in spirit. That's another important thing. I was like, geez, I never thought of that before. I never even noticed that before. So that was new to me. But that's a really important thematic reinforcement there. I have to give credit to both Tom Hanks and Helen Hunt for selling those characters who are not overly extraordinary in terms of like what they actually talk about. A lot of what they talk about and deal with is fairly mundane, but they make you really get invested in it despite how not important it is. And that was another thing they went through with the script drafts, was they were like, just make it about, real people and real situations. Don't Hollywoodize it too much, just make it real.
In the spirit of that, I think it is important to note at some point on here, because I don't know if it's been noted in the past, that Helen Hunt really is like the queen of being a super beautiful, relatable girl without trying to be,
Yeah, she doesn't ever try too hard.
I've had a fucking crush on her since I was a kid, and I don't care how old she gets. Like, I'm still like, yeah, Helen Hunt's like that librarian that can set me straight or something.
We're getting
you gotta need to check out that one movie.
We're getting a very revealing window into your fantasies there, Mo.
Hey, I'm upfront about it, dude.
Nothing wrong with that.
Helen Hunt is the business.
What's up?
Something also that can be looked at the beginning as it relates to later on is sometimes we do not see the forest for the trees,
Right.
so to speak. And a lot of times he's so wrapped up in his work, he in a way he takes for granted all that is really around him.
Yeah.
Family, his family, his fiance, all of them, just because, it's work. I mean, we all let our work get the best of us sometimes.
For sure.
Well, and that actually
he's a great
is
example too of like how he's like the perfect character for a Lost on a Desert Island situation, because he's so swept up in that stuff and the time and the schedule, that once he's put into that situation where it's like, well, now, dude, your work is staying alive and thinking about all that shit.
Right.
That you didn't have time to think about before. Now you got his time. 4 years ago.
And now he has to think about. Now he has to think about a very important, simple, basic concept. Water is where you find it.
That's right.
And, back to a Robinson Crusoe movie.
What you were saying before there, Brandon, that's a very important point about taking things for granted, because that does get paid off later in a pretty profound way. But one of the scenes that never gets talked about that actually is kind of important insofar as how mundane and seemingly unimportant it is the dinner scene, because there are all these overlapping conversations that happen that, the only thing that's really important that happens there is that they set up that, everyone's wanting them to get married, he hasn't done it yet, and that he has a toothache. Those are like the only things that are really important. But massive props to the sound department in this film, which actually the audio commentary track talks extensively about the sound design, like really extensively, because it's a very sound design heavy film, even more than you might realize. But one of the things is all the overlapping conversations, it's masses of humanity, albeit familial humanity, all talking about their things that are not all that important, and there's just a groundswell of all that all mixing together, which will be in sharp contrast with what we get on the island, which is a whole lot of not speaking and a whole lot of wave sounds and emptiness and a void. So again, it sets up the fact that there are all these things that we take for granted, which then gets paid off in the visual of, spoilers, he gets off the island. When he does get off, and he's surrounded by the masses of uneaten food from all over the world that he could have used, and fire that can come from a magic wand of sorts, a lighter, but it's
Right.
like all of these things that would be miraculous to primitive peoples and to himself, because he ostensibly has to regress to a more primitive mindset. All of these miracles of modern life that we just take for granted completely.
Well, also,
Well, dude, Gary
Also,
Kaufman
one thing-
puts it pretty great in Hatchet, where he talks about, like, there's that certain point in a survival situation where you are still the person you were when you showed up there for a while. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then either you wither and die in the woods, and they find you later, and you're like a missing 411 entry, or you fucking figure it out. And when that survival instinct kicks in, you have like a finite amount of time between then and when you're rescued, where if they don't rescue you, you become a different person altogether.
Yeah.
You're not the same dude that landed on the island anymore.
And
That
that's
became your
precisely
life,
that's precisely what the film is about, and why I like these kinds of stories, because it's all about extreme circumstances burning away the chaff of a person and making them into a better version of themselves.
Pretty
and
much the person they really are.
exactly.
Underneath all of that shit that you have because you're out in society all the time.
Yeah.
I did want to mention as well, I don't know if I had noticed this before, because it's been a while since I've seen this movie. It's been a hot minute. But Dane, you were talking about that spread at the welcome back party. Was anyone else highly amused that it was almost all seafood?
Yeah.
It was like sushi and crabs and all the stuff he's been eating for 4 years.
And those were like,
Yeah.
weren't those like Alaskan crabs, like the kind
King
that
crab, king
really
crab
di-
stuff, yeah.
they were
Right.
like the kind that are like
expensive
really difficult to catch, and
Yeah.
stuff.
And
that,
it was like, it's the kind of spread that I would love to see, but
yeah.
I haven't been on an island for 4 years, and he's probably kind of
crabs and coconuts.
Kind of
before you're
seafood out.
like Dave was talking about being Elvis out. I think he's probably seafooded out. He's probably
big time.
So where's the beef?
Now that does bring up an important point, because there are a lot of obviously very memorable scenes, and we will touch on some. But one of the things that I think is really important, and this just tells you how much work they put into the script, was there are a lot of things that we see that are important for his character. There are even more things that are just as important for his character that we do not see. And I think it's a lot of those things that we don't get to see that we get told about later, and why we're told about them later when we're told about them, that are pretty important, because the movie does just kind of get to the essence of this character and his development. It could have been a whole mini series if they wanted it to be, if they'd have shown everything, because apparently at some point they were talking about, the boat that does eventually find him, they were talking about a whole situation where he gets on board the ship where nobody speaks English, and then he has to go into isolation as far as like getting medically rehabilitated.
Like the other dude's like, I am the captain now. It was
a little bit, but like he has to go into medical isolation. So it's like the first thing that happens when he gets into human contact again is he has to get isolated again. And so they kind of like the dark humor of that, but they ultimately were like, we just don't need this. And so they didn't end up shooting it. But it's
oddly enough, now that would make fucking crazy sense. But back then, I can understand opting away from it,
Well, but it's more so like there are just certain things that you would think that we would see. The fact that we don't get to see them is really important, such as like his attempt at suicide. They were originally going to show that, and then they were like, it's more powerful to show it after the fact and what it meant for him, as opposed to actually seeing the event itself, which I think is a really I think that's a really just again there are all kinds of interesting things that they do and don't show us, which I think
That's
is really
actually
cool.
directly ripped from fucking Hatchet, dude. Like
Mm-hmm.
it has to be, because there's that whole like 4th chapter in Hatchet where he sees the plane leave, like, and then the next chapter you pick up with him and he's like, he had cut his wrists with the hatchet, but they don't ever actually show that part in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I don't know if it's directly ripped from Hatchet, but that sounds pretty goddamn spot on. You know?
I mean, a lot of survival narratives, just because the people who do survive extreme circumstances, if they do survive, they do tend to have to hit certain key milestones in order to survive.
True,
So
but the
sure
parallel of not showing it and then like it just being scars on his hand later, that are kind of offhandedly mentioned because it is from his point of view, so he has to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, but
that
we need
seems pretty close.
But the big thing, so he says I think Jake, you said this in the chat, that right before he has to go out unexpectedly on a trip, that he makes the mortal sin of saying, like he does not commit the sin of turning his back on time, but he does commit the sin of saying, "I'll be right back."
Oh yeah.
and he isn't back. So that's he didn't watch Scream, clearly.
Well, I mean, unless there's like someone having sex in a public campground and there's a dude with the mask hanging out by a lake, I figure he's probably pretty fine,
Oh, that's the part that they cut.
Yeah.
The part where Wilson is stalking around, setting this whole thing up, because we haven't even touched on him yet, but we will, and I have thoughts.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about him in depth. Because honestly, my favorite thing about the film is probably Wilson, and I'm not even saying that facetiously. I think the idea of Wilson,
it is rad.
No, I think the idea of Wilson is absolutely ingenious, and we'll get there. But like the point is, I think part of why they were able to get FedEx to say yes to this, despite it being not a product placement and despite it involving a plane crash, is more so the fact that they leave the cause of the crash ambiguous, and also they make it pretty clear that it is not it's not the company's fault. It's not
it's just a freak thing.
It's just
Exactly. It's just any number of things that could have happened. So in other words, and they know that plane crashes happen to every airline, everything known to man. That's it's happened.
That thing that rushes through your head when there's turbulence on a long flight. That's pretty much what the movie is. I mean, there's no implication that FedEx did anything wrong. And if anything, it puts them in a really positive light because, especially back then, his work till you drop mentality, as most people interpret things to the extreme, would have took it. Coupled with the fact that he still delivers the package at the end or whatever, made FedEx look really good.
Yeah, and actually, I think it did, despite it not being a formal product placement or anything, I think it did actually boost their brand quite a bit. And I know that
the thing is, I know it just go up looking like that, and I gotta deliver them.
At this point in time, FedEx was probably a better service at this point in time.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure, dude.
But also, I think Wilson, they sold like a shitload of volleyballs when they weren't before. They did. Also,
I bought one
because of this
film.
Yeah.
Yeah, me and Forrester in that camp for sure. We bought the Wilsons.
I think my family did too, if I remember.
Did you cut yours out and put a pineapple in it?
No, I should have though.
You should have, bro. Awesome. Like that's pretty much what I did, and it looked just like Wilson.
Playing volleyball.
He used to sit like right in the middle of my movie collection for a while. So if you saw photos, not many were taken back then, but if you saw him, the Wilson was like right there. Prominent.
Well, the actual plane crash itself is one of the standout sequences of the film. I'm a sucker for shipwreck scenes in movies and plane crash scenes, like if they involve the ocean. I'm a sucker for those. I don't know why. I think probably because I saw The Little Mermaid at such a young age, and that has
real shit, dude. I think they're the only movies that actually scare me. You know.
Oh, well, it's the
There's
plane
an
crash
element to
scene-
that where it's like that whole part freaks me the fuck out, and then thinking of being like stranded out there also freaks me out, and then just seeing people triumph over that or whatever, or get killed. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that stuff's rad too. What
Well,
I have
actually-
a problem with is like movies like that. Was 147 hours where that dude has to
Oh yeah.
no,
This is our
I
fault.
read the story. I saw the interview. I don't need to watch the movie. I'm good. You know, like that's I tap out at that point.
Well,
you
the
know?
actual,
I saw that when
the
it came out.
the actual cutting off of the arm is pretty gnarly, I have to say.
Yeah.
Dude,
Okay,
it just-
I was okay. So when 128 Hours came out, I was working at an art house theater in Utah,
Mhm.
where it was filmed and where it happened in real life and where we were showing it. And I
Oh.
remember this woman walked out of the theater like she passed out.
bruh, I think I would have been like
Oh.
right there, patting her on the back, doing like the putting the
Yes.
fucking cloak over or
Sad
whatever.
thing is, I made it through.
Some little Richard concert on Ron.
I made it through 127 hours too, but it's that
Right.
part, and I don't get squeamish easily, but even that was like, oh, that was.
Or what's
And
that
I've
one where
seen-
they're like up on the mountain and the lady keeps breaking her fingernails? What the fuck was that maybe?
I don't know, but well, the point being that the plane crash scene is one of my favorite scenes of that nature in any film,
Yeah.
just because it is so intense and it.
It's horrifying.
Well, it made a strong impression on me. I think, again, because I saw The Little Mermaid at a really young age, as did a lot of people, and that has one of the best shipwreck scenes I've ever seen in a movie. And so it gave, and I saw this movie at another similarly young, formative age, and so it did, again, leave another strong impression on me. So,
You know what they should have done is had him have like a hallucination sequence where Daryl Hannah came out of the water as like a mermaid.
Well, actually, it gives when you think about it, the fact that he tied this movie that he filmed What Lies Beneath in the middle of this one. He could have gone in a very different direction with that movie and had these two almost work together as a sort of a pairing, you know? It would have been interesting.
What Lies Beneath
Like-
should have been the fucking sequel where Wilson
Exactly.
takes his revenge.
That would have been awesome.
One thing I will say is Robert Zemeckis seems to have a fixation on doing films that are technically challenging.
Oh,
And I think he probably jumped at the chance to do a plane crash sequence, and he did something similar. He also directed Flight, where they narrowly avoided a plane crash, and that was a very interesting. He loves those films that give him a chance to really do something that maybe hasn't been done before, you know, the
which is
Back
awesome.
to the Future
Exactly.
movies, Who Framed Roger Rabbit,
That's-
Forrest Gump,
That's
and
what
then
I'm
the
saying, like,
and then like The Walk,
Polar
you
Express.
know. Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
dude, just Robert Zemeckis seems to have a knack for
Mhm.
doing movies in genres where normally
Right.
it would be painted as a certain thing. Like if we
Mhm.
did Back to the Future, it would just end up being a sci-fi comedy as
Right.
opposed to being like Back to the Future. You know, because we're fucking
Right.
nerds and we're gonna lean into shit that we love, and so I'm just gonna be like having dudes with TARDISes in there.
Well, it would be ready.
Like-
it would be Ready Player One, is what it
Yeah,
would
Well,
you know,
like-
exactly. It's a nerd movie. It's not Back to the Future. You know, like Robert
Well-
Zemeckis seems to be able to do these things and make them movies that
Right.
are but aren't the genre they're in. Like What Lies Beneath. If we did that, that'd be a horror movie. You know, but he managed to do it as like this strange family drama
Right.
sort of thing. You know.
Well,
That's
they-
Which
why I love
again, I was impressed seeing Harrison Ford in a villainous role where he actually was putting some effort into it, and
Oh,
that's
dude, I love that
kind of
movie
interesting.
so much.
But
Seeing
again,
Harrison
a
Ford
good
put effort into
illustration.
anything is hard to see.
You're
Yeah, I
gonna
know.
benefit from it.
But it's a good illustration. Well, I've said many times, Harrison Ford is better than anyone else alive at playing Harrison Ford. But half the time he just shows up for the paycheck. So it's like every now and then he'll really give it his all, though.
I feel like
but
in What
it
Lies
did-
Beneath, though, he came across as proper, like, kind of greasy. Like, he had,
Exactly.
like, he was getting old enough. He had a little bit of that
Yeah.
turkey neck going too. So, it made it, you know, His gizzards are just out there and shit. And he's fucking.
But the illustration, the what I would say is the perfect illustration. You were talking about like how much a plane crash kind of messed with you, Mo. And the older I get, the more acrophobic I become, and I'm not a fan of heights and never have been. But I'm becoming really bad with them, and I also usually don't give two damns about going to see a movie in 3D. I could care less most of the time. And yet somehow you put those two together. I insisted on watching The Walk in 3D. And
dude,
if any other director had done it, I probably would have gotten nauseous and maybe worse. And it was rough, but it was, on the other hand, it was really cool because he knows how to handle that stuff.
I love that you pointed this out, though, Jake, because
Yeah.
I think above all the gore and the greasiness, I've found your most triggering movie, and that would probably be Free Solo, because I still can't watch the entire thing.
I need to watch it. I want to find out why they
Dude, if you want to have an anxiety attack for like fucking 2.5 hours, then yeah. No, I would recommend people watch it, but if you have a problem with heights, like, dude,
I have a problem with the
punch
fact that
someone when stuff like that happens, 'cause
I
it's
have a
like,
problem with the fact that won the Oscar when they didn't even nominate Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, they should have.
Dude.
That Mr. Rogers documentary should have been nominated at the very least.
Well, show of hands here of people that have seen Free Solo. One?
I have.
Dude, that shit is worthy of that, you know. It doesn't necessarily mean other shit should have been snubbed, but that documentation of that is some shit that's never going to be recreated. That'd be like being able to be there and document this dude's survival on this island for 4 years and be able to report back on it with like in-depth, you know, documentary footage. It's just not going to happen.
Well, and speaking of which, let's get back on task here.
Yeah.
So,
You like how I did that?
yeah, I did. But the plane crash is incredibly thrilling. In the commentary track for this film, I didn't realize. Well, and I had listened to it maybe a year ago, but I re-listened to it again in preparation for this. I did not realize just how complex the soundscape is in terms of what it chooses to emphasize and not emphasize, because there's a ton of post-production sound to try to get it exactly right, but also to have certain things be emphasized or de-emphasized, because like there are definitely shots where like the on-set sound, the waves were like really roaring when they wanted it to be quieter and more atmospheric, and then other times where it was like, well, this probably should have been louder, but we wanted to do this, and this, or we had to do the sound of cannons for, you know, these kinds of waves and that kind of stuff. So there was that, but also I didn't know just how many visual effects shots there were in the movie, and there were a ton of them. I had no idea growing up. Nowadays I see them a little bit more, but even then, the whole idea with all that stuff was to try to make a soundscape and a visual effects palette that would do what you said, Jacob, and do things that were complex, technically complex, like a lot of the shots they accomplish the work of many shots in the course of one shot, because they're, you know, with a steady cam or with a, you know, trying to do a master and a close-up all in the course of one shot, but also because, like, you know, when he's on top of the mountain, you know, those shots are all done with a green screen, and I had no idea because they integrated so well, and they do.
Yeah, dude,
today.
that's fucked up.
And
I always thought
that
they
scene,
old Tamagotchi Hankerson fucking run up there on that cliff in real life, like.
Well,
and that scene where he was on top of the hill, that one kind of triggered my acrophobia a little bit, because that was a little bit of a drop.
I think I'm feeling what you're saying too, Jake. The older I get, the worse it's like, stay the fuck off of there. What, your mom didn't teach you better than this?
Well,
Get down. God damn it. Free Solo. Free your ass off the ground.
They had to do that shot against a green screen, because to get on top of that mountain would have required hauling this equipment up this really, really steep hill plus them trying to get the shot that they wanted. All of the water when he's up on the mountain, and you see that 360-degree surf breaking, in the distance. That's technically impossible for an island to have like those kinds of barriers in a 360. Apparently, that's not possible, but thematically, they wanted to reinforce his isolation. It most definitely does that, but it's like all those little things that you don't even notice are like them having to remove frame by frame raindrops from the camera lens, or removing insects and things like that, because they were like, we have to make sure he's alone. And like, or they were like, we had to add some more waves here. All this stuff that I didn't even know was there, and that's visual effects done right, because you don't even know that they're there.
Yeah, but and some of that stuff, did they maybe lose out on the survival element of it? Okay, like we could have had a whole part where old Tomcat Hankerdinkle fucking kicked Wilson into a bush full of the leaves that turned out to be insect repellent. You know what I mean?
I like the fact that there aren't very many living things, because it does. Well, the reason why they did that is because they were like, but the reason why they did that is because it's like if they had bugs or whatever, or other kinds of animals, he could have trapped them and eaten them. And they wanted it to be more of a challenge for him to have to learn how to fish and that kind of stuff, which I completely agree with. Okay. I know, but anyway, he's on the island, and it's all. This is the part where we can kind of summarize a bit more, because it's more about just him incrementally learning how to survive and learning how to do basic things like open a coconut and get the coconut milk, and learn how to make a fire, learn how to, attempt to make a sign with logs and stuff to hope catch a plane, or learn how to make.
It was kind of painful. It was kind of painful watching his efforts to make that fire. That was like, I was sitting there, I'm cringing my hands a little bit, like, ooh.
I know, because he rubs them raw, which is pretty gnarly. But they also said that they consulted with survival experts,
right?
And they were saying that you have to have a little bit of air, to have enough oxygen to feed it initially, but not too much, because as he says in one of my favorite lines, it's such a small thing, it's just how he delivers it, is the air got to it. The air got to it, and just screaming it at Wilson, which that introduces us to the.
That whole moment though, where he's like, "I have made fire," like that's real shit. If you ever stuck out somewhere where you had to figure it out from scratch, like in Hatchet,
he continues to make bigger and bigger bonfires as well.
I know.
Simply enjoyed doing it.
That introduces us to arguably the star of the movie, which is Wilson. And it comes about as the result of an accident and a injury that he rubs his hand raw, it's gushing blood. Throws the ball in frustration.
To quote my mom, it makes my butt tingle, bro. Wanna see that?
And keep in mind, he was trying to.
It's like you feel when you see something, and it's like it gives you that funny bone feeling where you're like, my mom calls that like it makes my butt tingle. Like it's.
I think we've learned a lot about your mom, stuff that I didn't think we would necessarily know about her.
A lot of him was also, he was trying to, of course, still adhere to his job at the time.
Yeah.
Because I thought about it, when I first saw the movie, I was thinking he was collecting those FedEx packages because he's looking for stuff to survive. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, no, he was collecting those FedEx packages because he
thought he would get saved.
I would get saved, and I am going to deliver these packages, darn it. And that goes along with him very well about that personality.
It really does. Well, and that's why it's important, like when he does attempt to escape the island in his dinky little raft and gets hurt as a result. That's why it's important that he does choose to open the packages when he does, because he realizes, I'm going to be staying here indefinitely. I need everything I can get. And apparently the impetus for the various things that are in the packages was that Robert Zemeckis, Tom Hanks, and the screenwriter, whose name escapes me at the moment. Let me look it up super fast. William Broyles. They were thinking about what are some of the weirdest, funniest things that could be in the packages, and then they took those objects to their survival experts and said, "Okay, figure out what you could do with this." And apparently, they came away with some really magnificent stuff made out of like videotape and stuff. And Robert Zemeckis was like, "Videotape, that is indestructible," And so apparently, it really could be used for a lot of the rope and stuff that he was using it for, which is pretty cool.
It's not indestructible, kids. Be sure to weave a tight rope.
Yeah, which he has to do, of course. But they too, the survival experts, they too made an axe out of the skates and that kind of stuff. But which that does kind of bring us to a line that always stuck with me, which is the most beautiful. It's kind of a trite card, and yet the card has a lot of meaning, which is the most beautiful thing in the world is, of course, the world itself. And that to me is very important because he reads it as in a very kind of monotone voice, and the card itself is designed in a very trite way. But I think that's pretty important thematically because, again, it's not about not taking things for granted, but also that the world around him, nature, is harsh and unforgiving, and yet it's also wondrous and bountiful in other ways.
I could see opening that and seeing that card and being like, "Fuck you," But then after a while, you'd be like, "They're kind of right."
Well, but we need to get to Wilson though, who pops up right after that. So he arises from an accident. Inventions and creations are often accidental, and it's out of frustration that he creates this thing that ends up being the thing that gets him through. And I think, if anything, that's the most important thing about the film is he has to not just survive, but he has to exercise his creative side. He has to create something other than himself to put his energies into to get him through.
I think it's important to go ahead, Roger.
I just wanted to point out that I think they made that Wilson character so Tom Hanks could speak because he had nobody. There was no one else to talk to. The show, once he gets to the island, there is very little dialogue other than screaming and frustration, or screaming and because he's in pain in some way. And Wilson, I guess, either being a friend that he constructs or a god that he can worship, one or the other. I can't figure out which one it was. Is an outlet for him to say some lines, throughout the show that have some sort of outside discourse. Because there was nothing in his mind that said, "Oh, I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about that." It's all oral. So he emotes everything, but he has to have something to talk about throughout the movie. So because you don't want a movie that has all kinds of silence. That's all. So that kind of gives them the audience a chance to get some little bit of relief to not think so much and think about just listen to the movie.
Yeah,
I fully agree, dude. And
it did give him an opportunity to externalize and to vocalize, which is important. So it serves a practical story function.
It does, but at the same time, it makes a lot of sense in like a social lens. You know what I mean? I do want to say that for some reason, what Roger said made me think a lot about how hilarious this movie would be if it was done like Clan of the Cave Bear, where they just grunt. Also starring Daryl Hannah, so there's that 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. Daryl Hannah was like the main chick in Clan of the Cave Bear.
Yeah, but the
Quest for Fire.
But dude, like, excuse me, is she in Quest for Fire?
No. I'm just saying.
I didn't think so.
It could be done like Quest for Fire too.
True, but they subtitled that bitch in the Clan of the Cave Bear. Like I remember watching that as a kid, and they were like, and it's like so that might have prepped me up in some weird way for like anime and samurai movies. But outside of that, I take a little bit of a issue with people saying that Wilson was created or cropped up or whatever. Wilson was born out of that moment, like it's that frustration and that loneliness and that absolute peak moment of that shit all going wrong because he got a little confidence. He thought that he was doing okay, and then he fucks himself up. So he's like vulnerable for a minute, like, oh shit, that's bleeding a lot. I might die, and then this seemingly inanimate object is given life through his blood in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you could definitely read it as like a statement about art, because he literally puts his blood, sweat, and tears into something and creates something greater than himself, at least for him, something that gets him through.
I'm still of the mentality that Wilson somehow caused this entire thing.
Well, you know what's funny though. So again, talking about the script and how many versions there were of the script. Apparently, some drafts Wilson could speak, and some drafts Wilson could come to life, like and move around and stuff.
See, if I'd wrote this, I would have had a Wilson be
like a little claymation Wilson.
Himself,
maybe, but the what's interesting though, apparently and I haven't read the script myself, so I can't confirm this, but I believe in the actual script that they shot that Wilson did have lines. They just chose not to record them and like have them play back, but he did have lines that Tom Hanks, at least in his own mind, could play off of, which makes sense because eventually he does start to have actual conversations with Wilson. And the fact that they
feelings.
Well, but the fact that they don't, I think again, the genius of Wilson is the fact that he does not speak. He does not get anthropomorphized, so we have to use our imagination just like he does.
In that brief moment too that the suicides mentioned.
Yes.
Doesn't he say that we already tried that?
Yeah, and he said, do you have to keep bringing that up again? You were right. It's a good thing we did a test. It wasn't just going to be a quick little snap. Would have broken my neck or my leg or my back. Would have bled to death. That was a year ago.
Did try to kill him.
So why don't you just forget it? Well, we might just make it. Did that thought ever cross your brain? Well, regardless, I would rather take my chances out there on the ocean than sit here and die on the shithole island, spending the rest of my life talking to a goddamn volleyball.
And that's where he kicks him, I think. And that's the saddest scene of the movie is where he's like, I didn't mean it. I love that.
I love that scene too. But like, again, what I love about it is, again, Wilson does not speak. We have to use our imagination. We have to fill in the holes. And yet Wilson's personality is so distinct because he made his personality distinct. And so it's Chuck channeling, it's Chuck channeling some of his self-doubt, but also the part of him that just needs an opposite force to bounce off of, because I like to think that Wilson is kind of critical, does express some of his self-doubt, but also is a friend. Apparently Tom Hanks imagined Wilson's voice sounding like Robert Zemeckis, and he imagined him saying things like, "You're never going to build that fire," and that sort of thing. But
that's kind of how I take the character, just based on their relationship and the stuff that we actually hear Tom Hanks say. Like, Wilson wasn't exactly a supportive ally through the whole thing. No. He was like, maybe you should fucking take a leap off of that goddamn cliff up there, because that might be a quicker solution to this. So it was
it's
that your part of your brain you project into something like that, I think, but then like other elements of other people too.
Yeah, well, that's what's so great about it, is that he's neither the angel on his shoulder nor is he the devil on his shoulder. He's kind of a hybrid of both. He's just his shadow side, if you want to think about it psychologically.
Like the logical brain, He has to consult Wilson to figure out what the actual plan is.
Well, the logic, but also some of the self-doubt too, because with logic can often come self-doubt. And he even says that in the ending monologue, which is, of course, in my opinion, the scene of the movie that ties it all together, which is that, all my logic said I would never see this place again. And then one day that logic was proven all wrong, that whole thing. So in a way, Wilson kind of is the logical side of his brain, but along with logic, especially in those kinds of extreme circumstances, logic along with that can come a lot of self-doubt. And so that's why apparently also as survivalists, this power of self-belief and that kind of stuff can get you through it as well. And so that we'll get to that whole ending bit when we get there, but yeah, basically it's just him burning away the chaff of himself, becoming the best version of himself, and along with that comes the power of creation, of creating fire and of creating another persona, another being, a work of art, a god, a mythological creature, if you want to think of it that way.
And a sweet-ass beard you could probably hide a tiny bird in if you really wanted to.
You probably could. And that beard and that hair, those were all really Tom Hanks's real beard and real hair, and that's the thing with, like, they took many months off. He got into shape, let his hair grow out, got a lot of sun, got the kind of sun-bleached blonde look because of all that sun exposure. And, that was really
it. He did the Christian Bale
he did.
Without becoming a fucking psycho.
Pretty much. But, that's why they had the big jumps in time to 4 years later, which I remember seeing that as a kid, and I was like, holy shit, because no movie I'd ever seen had ever done that before. And that's still really a ballsy decision. There are a lot of things that you would never think to do, and even in like a big movie, most people probably couldn't get away with doing like just the big jumps in time like that. And the fact that the audience has accepted all these things that on paper you're like, an audience would never accept a 4-year gap. They would never accept Wilson. They would never accept all these things, and yet all the ingredients came together to make it work. But that's when we get the sail made from the porta potty there. It shows up on the shore, and that's when he's able to actually get enough wind power to get past the breakers that were keeping him there. And
obligatory early 2000s CGI extravaganza is pretty much what ensues after that, where it's like, and then
even that, I thought I didn't even notice that those were CGI effects, partially because I was so young when I saw it, but I see it more now. But like even then, they blend together very well. But the important thing to keep in mind is that we do not hear score prior to him actually getting off the island past the prison that was keeping him there. And only then does the haunting Alan Silvestri Castaway theme does it come into play. Because as much as the island was a prison for him, it also was his home for 4 years. And so you have that really bittersweet, haunting theme that comes in, and it really it reinforces the fact that he made a big step. He could have just stayed there and lived out the rest of his days, which could have been long or short or who knows what. He could have done that, but he took a risk, and off he goes. And
do we get that moment in Castaway where he accepts the place as home? Because in Hatchet, there's that moment where he is walking away from it, and he's talking to him. The whole book is in talking to himself about what he has to do next, and he says I'm gonna go do this and then come back home. And that's when he realizes holy shit, I've stopped thinking of home as home. I've started thinking of this place as home.
I wouldn't say the moment, if it's there, it's never spelled out for you. I would argue that moment with the music, I think that says it, because as much of a prison as it was his home. And but it's also that there's no going back. It has that feel to it, because no matter what happens, if he gets off or not, there is no going back. And that place was his home, and it's gone now. He has to let that part of him go. And I just love the bittersweetness of it. There's a lot of bittersweetness in the film, and that's what I always think about it in that context, and I love it for that reason. But gradually he gets, again, for each thing that he was given, he was given a sail, given the porta potty ball there.
Yeah.
He was given it, and then he got it taken away. He was given Wilson, and he had him taken away. And that's a really important theme in the film, is like the things in your life that you're given at a certain time, they can get taken away, but then something else comes along that's even better than what you thought.
Right.
I think
And,
an important device in survival literature, filmmaking, whatever, is being able to tell a story where it's like you can show that person's, where they start stripped away to nothing, and eventually adapt to that.
Well,
to where life seems impossible, but then you send them back to the world, and you illustrate kind of how, in some ways, their life was better when they were back where they were.
They're made stronger as a result, and and that's where for each thing that gets given to him, it's a blessing. But then when it gets taken away, despite how heartbreaking it is, which I was heartbroken as a kid and still now, when Wilson, he has to let him go.
R.I.P., man.
Well, he has to let him go because he only has as much strength to either do one or the other, get Wilson or keep hold of the raft, because he's malnourished. He's barely getting by, and it's just that for me was so heartbreaking, and you really buy. Again, it's like one of those things only Robert Zemeckis, only Tom Hanks could make you get really emotionally invested in this, because anybody else that would have come across
bothers me too, man. Not knowing what it would have been like if he had been able to hold on to Wilson.
Well,
in my mind, I almost kind of picture like
that would have been a fun ending.
Well, but
I almost kind of picture him with like someone else having had a couple of kids, and they're running around, and he's like, writing a book about his experience on the island, and you just see Wilson like out in the garden, like as a centerpiece.
But in a way, though, again, it does thematically reinforce what will happen on a much greater scale when he does get off. He does get back to civilization. He wants so badly to get back to Kelly, to Helen Hunt, and he does not get her because she thought she had to let him go, and she had another life, and she can't just give that up. And there were some younger viewers of the movie in the test audience, which the movie tested horribly, which is funny because it made a shitload of money despite it testing horribly. So that just tells you that conventional wisdom doesn't know everything. But it tested badly, especially with like younger females who apparently were like, well, why can't she just dump the husband for Chuck Nolan? But then older female viewers were like, well, no, she's got a whole life, and she had to.
She thought he was dead.
Yeah. And she can't, and clearly she does love her husband still, and she's got a kid, and she has a life, and she can't just give all that up, and I thought that was a very mature message, and one that I've understood more as I've gotten older.
In the last section of the movie, you actually have a situation where Tom Hanks, the character, still is a castaway. He leaves the island, but now he's still isolated. He loses his life, loses his place he lived at. He lives all, he has some, platitudes from his boss. That's about it. He can't talk to anybody out there because he's been isolated. I found that to be a kind of almost like a hilarious irony kind of situation that he was so desperate to get off the island because he was going to kill him, but he goes back to a place where there's nothing there anyways. So he loses everything and continues to go to have the same kind of situation.
And
a little bit different, but all the way through the end.
It's like that Twilight Zone episode where the guy has all the books and all the time.
Oh, yeah, that's a great episode. Time enough at last.
Now, I think Mo was right, but I think if Wilson had gotten off the island with him, the scene wouldn't be about that. She'd come back and he'd say, look, I was here to tell you I've got somebody else.
Oh boy!
And it just be him with Wilson.
And yet, Tom Hanks had a Wilson
he smells like
volleyball.
pineapple, tastes
Well, that's-
like vinyl,
that's-
He had a
fucking
Wilson
knows how to love
volleyball
me.
in his truck.
That's where I was going. Was that so? He loses the Wilson that got him through the island. He loses the woman who, despite not physically being there, the hope to see her again got him through it. Loses that woman. But he, in the very last bit, we see him driving in the car with a new Wilson ball, brand new. And there's the hope of something more with the person, because the package that he does not open is the one with the wings on it, makes the delivery, and it's the woman that there might be a hope of a relationship with her, and it was something even greater that he didn't even know was that he was being guided towards. And that's what the my favorite scene in the film, and I think the one where everything comes into full focus, is his monologue, which again is like maybe two shots, like close up on the glass, and then the rest of it is just one half circle revolving shot. It's just an extraordinary piece of acting, extraordinary piece of minimalist filmmaking. But like that whole thing, it's like that to me is the film. It's him realizing that he had dreams and he had aspirations that got him through the worst of times. He fought, he struggled, and he still didn't get what he wanted, and yet he got something greater, which was this sense that he had to stay alive, had to keep breathing, and that he, despite losing everything he ever wanted, it's like he's left with with a sense of faith of saying, I know what I have to do now. I have to keep breathing, because tomorrow the sun will rise. Who knows what the tide can bring? And that's what leads us into that very ending scene where there's a good hope that he could find something even more meaningful than he thought that he had with her. And that to me, that is the movie. And I was like, well, that's why I got to spotlight it, because I think all of us with the pandemic, and especially me with the losing my fiance even before that, and just all of the loss that I experienced and all the shakeups and stuff, it's like that movie means more to me now than it did even then. And because I've experienced so much of it, and it's like you have to find things find things that are greater than yourself, find a sense of faith, not necessarily in the religious sense, but in the sense of believing that there are things out there that are greater than the immediate and the physical, than what you can necessarily understand right now, and believing that you're headed in that direction, and that it's something greater than you could have even imagined for yourself. It's not what you wanted, but what you needed. And I think that's what that's really what it's about. Is it's about someone having everything taken away from him, being quite literally cast away, and that's why there's a space in between. It's not cast away, it's cast away. He was cast away. Everything that mattered to him was cast away from him, only for him to realize that there are things out there that are even greater than anything he could have ever imagined, and he just had to keep breathing, because who knows what the tide could bring. And I felt like, well, that's it. That's the movie. That's why I got to talk about it.
I got a different impression at the end of the movie. I guess there's two ways of looking at it. There's the part with hope. I kind of looked at it. It was the fact that the package had golden wings on it. The truck had golden wings, and I was like, golden wings on the farm that they came from. That represented the place that he didn't want to go. Icarus had golden wings, got burned, then he fell to the ground and died. It's just something, I get the impression that the combination of the wings and the combination of the paths, that there was a little bit of internal dialogue, but I think he would want to stay as a aimless guy. He just didn't want to be around people anymore. That the roads represent all different places that he could go now, instead of being tied down to a single place. Because now he's all used to.
It's a different way of looking at it.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. I'm not necessarily sure that the text points in that direction, but it's not a wrong interpretation necessarily, because they do end it at the four-way crossroads, and it's quite literally, you know, the whole quest is like, where can he go from here? Because he's a dead man that was essentially brought back to life, so he's got a whole new lease on life. And so the choice is ultimately his as to which direction he will go in. You know, so for all we know, he might not go back towards her. I think it's kind of implied that he will, because of this inexplicable guiding force. You know, you could call it God, you could call it the divine, or providence, whatever. You know, that which is inexplicable, which I think the whale, which we didn't touch on, I think the whale kind of is the first sign that, again, it's a majestical sense of something that's bigger than you, that is watching you, and is kind of mysterious, but you know, you don't fully understand it, but it has good intentions, and that's why the whale wakes him up when the boat comes along. A similar thing here with like this inexplicable thing that comes along and is pointing him in the direction of something that he didn't even know was
kind of
out
like
there.
Kind of like fate. He's going to guide him towards his path that he needs to get off the island, get out of the sea, and get back to land.
Yeah, fate, providence, God, you know, whatever you want to say.
I think it's pretty obvious what happens at the end, and that's that, you know, if you pay close attention to the subtleties of the film, it points right to this. And that's that, you know, old Thomas Hiserson fucking took, you know, our boy, Wilson, in a tote bag for the gym around, and he just killed all those people that, you know, ever sent FedEx packages.
We're getting some interesting interpretations here.
Well,
the very end of the movie is he's just like, you know, holding Wilson in his hand, like real close to the camera, and it pans up.
I have to say,
I like your gay slasher film version of this movie, Mo.
Actually, I got a.
Okay.
It was planned all along, dude. Fucking Wilson compelled him to crash the plane.
There was an interview.
Jake, you go first. You've been trying to spit something out, and then Brandon, you can jump in.
Well, I was going to say I find these interpretations quite amusing.
Me too.
But I had a pretty clear interpretation at the end, and part of that has to be my own what I brought to the table with that end scene. As I pointed out in the commentary, I was absolutely thrilled when I learned that this film, one of the things that caught my attention before I even saw the movie, and I should have mentioned this in my opening probably, is that Laurie White had a role in the film. And I was at the time a country fan, and I still enjoy some. Laurie White was a very talented singer. I was shocked to learn that she passed a couple of years ago.
Oh.
She's not old. But she, I liked seeing her in this scene. I liked her energy. She was very cute at the time. And so my interpretation hewed very close to what apparently was Tom Hanks's one. I read this little trivia bit where he was asked by James Lipton, what happened at the end? Well, he turned around. He went back and made babies with that lady.
Yeah. I remember that. I remember that. Yeah, it's like, good for you, Tom, because that was my
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah,
me
too.
Banged the old lady?
What's that?
I'm about that.
But I think I saw this. The trivia here mentions the Super Bowl ad. I think I saw that. I think I remember.
I feel
that.
like that rings a bell.
It was like there was that Super Bowl ad where he returns the package, And he's like, what was in the box anyway? And she's like, oh, just a satellite phone, GPS locator, fishing rod, water purifier, seeds, some silly stuff.
Dude, I feel like we got a lot of bonkers Super Bowl ads for a while, but once we saw Janet Jackson's titties, like it just blanked it all out, like an EMP pulse for a couple of years. You know what I mean? I don't even remember what the hell they did the year before. You see Janet's titty though? That's like,
they've gone downhill in the last decade, that's for sure.
Apparently, I only saw this because Chris Stuckman brought it up, but apparently there was a trailer for Castaway that gave away the fact that he gets off the island, and they tried to make it such that it was like, how can you rebuild your life after? They tried to sell it as like a romantic drama, which it has romance in it for sure. But they tried to make it like that whole like last scene with him and Helen Hunt. They tried to make it out like that was the
that would have been movie. If that would have been the fucking movie, I would have kicked Wilson into the fucking ocean myself.
Brandon, you're trying to say something.
Oh well, I just was saying what Jacob said at the end. I was planning on bringing that up.
Oh, the Super Bowl ad.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, so that I like the thing you brought up with like, oh yeah, he turned around and he made babies with that lady. I'm like, make some babies real quick.
Quick record scratch, some porno jams, some fat bass, and then it just kicks into the Golden Girls theme, and then the credits roll.
Did anyone play the video link I sent out?
Not yet, but I will.
Okay, because that was one of Laurie White's biggest hits. It's called "Lead Me Not," and it's about a woman at a bar saying, "Lead me not into temptation. I can find the way all by myself." And it's a good jam, but it seems fitting for that discussion.
It does, especially in the context of going and finding that old lady that has that FedEx package that's been outstanding for a few years, and being like, "Girl, I brought the gifts."
I just love the directions this is going in. It's like it turning into like an old lady porn crossed with a slasher film. I love it. I like her, what she brings to that character, because she's very spunky and memorable, despite not having a lot of screen time. And it's like, you could see why this guy would like her. She's got some energy, and
you learn how to you learn a few things about love, and also how to crochet a sweet doily.
Well, everyone needs a hobby.
Doilies are real shit, dude. You ever put something on your coffee table and it scratches it up a bit, and it's like, man, I wish I had a doily right there.
Hey, Mo, that would be a great name for a slasher flick.
The doily murders, for sure.
No. I wish I had a doily.
I wish I had a doily. Yeah, that is a great name for a movie. Hey, I'm just being practical, dude. Tom Hanks got me in the mood to fuck it. I think it's the first time I've said his name properly all night. He got me in the mood to be practical, so I was like, it should probably never mean doily.
Okay. So we did touch on the music a little bit with James Horner's, Alan Silvestri's theme. Eddie, because I was going to say we need to talk about music and stuff, but we just have the one theme pretty much. We already touched on the Elvis themes, the Elvis songs a bit. But
there was that sweet Russian choral thing early on. That was great.
That makes me want to call Putin up and ask him to make me a doily. But Alan Silvestri's theme, I think it's, again, such a minimalist thing. It's just like this one piece of music, But holy crap, does it do? Oh, it is the movie in musical form, and it pops up in all the right places. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's incredibly beautiful, but also really haunting and melancholic, and it's got some hope to it, but it's also got loss. It's got everything, all in one single theme.
Crochet does sound pretty Russian too, dude. There might be some Russian doily connection that we're missing, but we'll cover that in another discussion.
Maybe there was a doily inside of the Matryoshka doll that he gave her in the car.
You
don't
never
know.
know.
What about favorite scenes?
Man, I'm always going to come back to when he first
that's
pierces his hand. That's like in terms of scenes where it really cements the desperation of the situation. When he fucks his hand up, it's pretty real because he gets it good. You know,
yeah, I would say
not like one of
Wilson.
those. Dude, that's like some right to the ER shit. Like if my friend came to me with that in my backyard, I'd faint. You know,
he had a couple of those, like where he falls against the coral. That was
my god,
really gnarly.
Yeah.
When you think about the fact that I always used to look down on like surfers because I skateboarded growing up, and so I was slamming on like concrete. But then when I thought about the fact that like they get bounced against coral reefs sometimes, I'd rather like fall on concrete every day than ever get like swept into a wave and just bashed against the rocks.
Yeah.
Forrest, favorite scene?
When he loses Wilson, man. In the ocean, it's his only source of interaction for the last 4 years, and he's completely cut. It's like he's feeling completely cut off.
It was, dude. It's like when Littlefoot's mom dies in Land Before Time. Like you're like, damn.
Brandon,
I would say the plane crash scene when he goes through that whole thing. It's terrifying for the most part there. The ocean waves, how huge they are. I swear, when I was watching that, I felt like, okay, after all this, he's going to find himself a lighthouse. And he's going to go to a city beneath the ocean. And for those of you who play video games, you probably can get that reference later.
True enough, but was that the circumstances or the sweater talking? You know what I mean? Because he did look like he was going to get a captain hat at some point, and it just didn't happen.
Roger, favorite scene?
Oh, it's easy. Way in the beginning where we had the airplane crash with all the water coming on in, the desperate time. Suddenly there was like, oh, everything's great, and suddenly whoosh, bang, boom. I said, whoa, look at this. And so all this stuff was happening. That was the scene I played back a couple times.
Oh, yeah. Jake,
Roger, real talk, I worry about you because of that grid array. Just make sure it's supported properly because I'd hate to have that happen with you, but just with anime,
Did you say yours?
You could go happy, buried by what you love.
No. There were a couple moments, like I love the fire scene where he finally gets the fire and where he finally figures out the coconuts. Like some of his small victories, I really enjoy. And then the very end, the part where he's literally at the crossroads and he's got the choice of becoming a drifter in a slasher movie or going and making babies with the cute country lady. I mean, which one's he? It's a fun moment. He's finally free to
make that choice.
He's really
he did all of the above while wearing sweet sweaters.
He had a.
He's 5 years out at most from a pretty major dad sweater collection.
Yeah, I don't understand why Norman Bates can't have like a national tour. He's showing off some birding, some. Yeah.
She let's not forget that she had a dog also, so she's an animal person She's an animal person on top of it, so she's a keeper
Let's
already.
be real about the fact too that when he saw that dog, he's like, "Man, that would have came in handy on the island." And he's just like smacking his lips and shit, you know. Again,
Hello, hot dog.
happen.
Dave, your favorite scene?
Trying to think.
There's so many to choose from.
Yeah, there's so many small things. I would have to say anything with Wilson.
Oh, I know. Love
Yeah.
Even though I know the plane scene is fucking brilliant, but I would have to say anything with Wilson, especially when he first starts lighting the fire. Because it's almost like he's lighting it to a freaking god.
Yeah, and he has someone to celebrate with, man. I mean,
and I mean, let's be real. Like, how much more cavemanish is it than to make fire and to like announce it, in a very like classically, cavemanish macho way? And I love that how that's played for comedy, but it's like he's really happy, but also like he realizes kind of in the middle of his
as modern humans, we would totally do that. You would do like if you actually accomplish that out in the wild, you're gonna do like your caveman impression.
Well, but
I might even be doing the like scooping, shit from below me and throwing it up like a monkey and dancing around the fucking fire. Like, yes, I'm not gonna die right now.
Well, it's an important theme of the film is that we are not that far removed from our ancient ancestors, but also what I like about it is that being said, so yeah, he does accomplish what our ancient ancestors did have to find out, and he does that, and he's like about as cavemanish as can be, but then he also realizes kind of in the middle of it all, he kind of becomes self-aware, and he's like, I've made fire! I've made fire! And he has that perfect gap, and I was like, oh, that's perfect. Because he realizes, oh wait, I'm saying this to nobody in particular. Okay, but I just love that too. But yeah, my favorite scene is easily the ending monologue. I was just like, that's it. I've watched that anytime that you ever feel like depressed or like you don't know where you're going in your life and it's hopeless and all that stuff. I always pop that on. It's like that's what gets you through. It has to keep you going. Any final thoughts? If not, then we can do our little out.
Well, I would ask, like, how long do you guys think he could survive on the island? Just in.
Oh God.
Well, if he lived there for 4 years. Well, if he lived there for 4 years.
Hard to say.
Let's start with Roger.
How long can he live there? Probably until the day he dies.
How long?
How long
could you live there?
I'm pretty sure Roger would have like a Haruhi fucking statue sculpted inside of the first day, and
without technology and stuff, I don't have much of a hope. I'm not a survivalist.
He's talking to that, and it's giving him orders, and he's going around like doing shit for the Haruhi statue, collecting stuff. I'm sorry, bro. Go ahead.
That's all right, buddy. But yeah, that's the point. Yeah, I'm not a survivalist, so I'm a technology guy. So I definitely like my cave at home. So I wouldn't have much of a chance to live there for long.
I don't think I'd live there for more than a day or two, to be honest. And I mostly because I have a lot of food allergies and stuff, but also
for real though, in a desperate situation, you don't think you'd last more than a couple of days?
I mean, I don't know, but with strict rationing of whatever food I could find that was edible.
You're gonna find out your food allergies real quick, dude. Like, and
but it's like
mostly it's probably not gonna kill you, like with just a little bit of sample.
I mean, you'll probably be outside of America, so it's not like they're gonna be putting any chemicals or food additives.
No,
food
It's not that. It can be stuff that occurs in the wild too. But if it were something that could do it to me, I'd find out real quick, and I would be I'd find out quickly that I was a goner. So that's why I mean, like, I'd probably be a day or two, depending on what all I had at my disposal. Which does lead me to a super, super quick interjection, which is that without this film, we would not have Lost. because Lost was originally developed as Castaway the series, and then
Hmm.
it took a lot of detours and a lot of journeys,
A lot of wrong
into-
ones.
a lot of journeys into sci-fi and all that stuff, and then it became Lost. And
I love
so, yeah.
Lost, but man, come on. Like that is basically the final rating for that series.
That's what I
For
think.
most
That's,
people anyways.
that's
I
what
still
most
have to
people-
revisit it.
that's what most people think. I absolutely loved Lost from beginning to end, but like,
I like
but
most of it.
point being that we would not have it without this film. So that's just a super
Right.
quick.
What about you,
interjection.
Jake? You think you'd survive? How long do you think you'd survive on the island?
Oh, a few days at least. It's hard to say, mostly because I'm getting old, my body's falling apart, and I don't know how it would hold up in that setting, but I like to think I could make it.
I don't know why my impression of you is that you'd just, like, we'd find you in like 4 years and you'd be wearing monk robes with like a staff and you'd be like, I've tamed the insects. And there's just like
They're very tasty.
dragonflies following you into the fucking.
You're very creative tonight.
What about
so
you, Dave? No,
Me?
go ahead, Jake. Jake had more to add, though.
Well, I was going to say, so you're saying I turned into a Disney princess while I'm there?
I don't know
No,
if
you-
that's the
no,
term.
you would-
I mean,
you would
it's
turn into-
2021, bro. We're
So you
past
would
that.
you'd turn into Tim the Enchanter from Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
There are
Apparently.
some who call me Tim.
Tim.
Jake would be that guy you'd come to midway through a Conan movie, and he'd be like, "I don't really have anything that's gonna like solve this for you, but I have some good advice," And he'd be like, "Yes, okay, thank you for your fruits." Dave, how long do you think you'd survive on the island?
I have a lot of fat on me, so I would definitely probably survive at least for a couple of days.
Yeah, had some weight you could afford to lose.
Yeah. And my A1C levels would probably go down and shit. So I
mean,
have type 2 diabetes. So
Well, that is why human beings, when we eat carbohydrates and fats and stuff, there is a reason why we get fat as a result of it, because those things were not too easy to come by in our ancient history, and so when we could get them, we had to store all that energy that we could, and
I do know how to fish.
Well, yeah, but nowadays we have an excess of it, and that's why there's such a
You'd
obesity
like fish
problem.
if you're on that island for a couple of days, Dave. What about you, Brandon?
Maybe 10 years ago. I could do more.
10
than
years
I
ago,
did.
you can't time travel in this scenario.
Yeah, I wouldn't survive too long. I have some of the skill sets from like I know how to build a fire without matches. I know how to fish on decently well, but I also am allergic to shellfish, so
Yeah,
there would be no crab for me. I can tell you.
No
I could-
crustaceans.
I couldn't eat the crab. I couldn't eat those fish without maybe
I
the
couldn't have eaten
coconut.
it raw.
Well, I would have really struggled with the food situation. So I mean, that probably would have done me in pretty quick.
I feel like you guys would change your mind after that real hunger set in.
Well, you can change your mind, but you can't change
Oh
your body.
well, after the asphyxiation sets in, it would be very different.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, dude, yeah, I mean, we could probably put all of us in a situation where you drink fucking seawater. If I mean, we never really know until we're there.
Yeah, you never know until you reach a situation where you're desperate.
Well,
you
that's,
never know.
if you reach that point where you're like, well, fuck it, I'm gonna die anyway, then that's a different kind of mindset, though.
What about you, Forrest? How long do you think you'd last?
Oh God, maybe. Well, I guess maybe a week. But at the same time, I don't know. Maybe I get time to lose my dad bod, even though I don't even have kids. But
It all depends on what all you start with and where you land. You know, like what kind of vegetation's in the area, what kind of animals, what kind of supplies you do or don't have. Which, I mean, that's kind of what led me to Lost. Is like that plane was fairly well equipped, and they also landed on an island that was pretty lush, even before they knew about the others and all that stuff.
I mean, not for nothing. I mean, and this isn't racist, but I feel like Forrest's got a little bit of an Asian edge here because he's like, yeah, I'd be like good for a week, with just shit my grandma probably taught me. Whereas the rest of us are like, damn, I don't know how to like eat a bird.
I will tell you now, like this is not that like that stuff that I never ever learned from my grandmother.
Well, you know what I mean, but like, there's a reason friggin' Japanese dudes were like getting fished out of the jungle 40 years later is because they were hardcore like that, Like, I think just between me and Forrest and his Asian cooking and my acquaintance with like really low end taco trucks, we'd be really good for like probably years because we'd be like that fucking. You see that lizard that lives over there? Well, I'll probably eat that, and I'm sure.
Yeah, because there's totally taco trucks on a desert island.
You never know.
I could have gotten.
Dude, I feel like some of them, their recipes come from them.
Well, then again, there was at least a piece of a porta potty, so who knows? Maybe there's a piece of a taco truck on there too.
I know this simply.
Why do you think the porta potty was in pieces?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Somebody had a taco that didn't agree with them and just exploded the thing.
Yeah. It doesn't happen by accident, dude. It's I think I'd be good for as long as whoever I was there with was good. And then if it was just me by myself, I think I'd be good for a long, long time.
You're
because
thinking very positively.
Once you get past like needing to eat things for them to taste good, you can just be alive, And
well, but again, you're assuming that you would have enough, natural resources with which to eat, and that's
I'm also
part of the
assuming
point
that there would be other people that died in the plane crash that I could swim back down and maybe harvest.
That is like the whole point.
Actually, he did waste that opportunity when he had that pilot there.
There was a huge
shut him down. He sure did.
Right
thought he'll take the bell too.
I'm sorry, guys. Any of you guys crash with me if it's you're gonna die? There'd be that conversation where it'd be like, you're gonna die, right? And then they'd be Forrest would be like, yeah. I'd be like, I'm gonna eat you, okay? And
okay, sure.
All right.
I'm still alive.
And if it went the opposite way, I would be down. I mean, just eat me, flay me up in some fucking delicious cutlets, man. Roast me on like a license plate. I don't give a shit.
This is definitely taking a weird turn.
I know.
Certainly got kind of strange.
I think of all of us, the people that look like they would be the most delicious to eat would be Brandon and Dane.
The
lanky, athletic type.
I'm so flattered.
I hope a bottle of Sweet Baby Ray's washed us up.
Do we want to give our outros really fast? 'Cause we do have to. Some of us do have to work tomorrow.
Yeah.
Same.
Well, I am Dane Kyle, filmmaker out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm on this show on my channel, Indie Horror Film Creative. One of my random Blu-ray views episodes where I talked about the Chucky series. It was just a random one. It wasn't even an extraordinary one, but it got like 1,300 views out of nowhere. And I was like, how in the hell did that happen? I don't know. But that's just good to know that people are watching at least some of them. But yeah, you can find me there, friend me on Facebook, all that good stuff. Thank you for listening to these two films about two very different kinds of survival.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to cook your friends, make sure to be mindful of the types of seasonings and sauces that you use and complement them with the appropriate doses of either. My name is Mosley. I've been doing, discussions with these guys for a little bit. I haven't done shit on YouTube as late, but I definitely have like 17 episodes of Full Moon Madness for you guys to check out. So if you get a chance, pop over there, give that a look.
I've
Okay.
been waiting for all those
Eat your
episodes.
friends responsibly. Also,
I've been
How about you,
starving
Forrest?
for the Full Moon Madness.
All right, I'm Forrest Bennett, based in Long Island, New York. I'm an independent film producer. Also make regular appearances on Unger the Radar, whose host Randy Unger was on our pre-show. I also make appearances on another YouTube channel called Evil Greg, where we're currently doing a dramatic table reading of George Miller's unproduced Justice League script. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got for now.
you also make frequent appearances in my heart for us because I fucking love you, dude. You're pretty awesome. You're one of my favorite additions to this whole ruckus that we got going here.
Alrighty. Roger, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. My name is Roger Proctor. I'm a car salesman. I also have a pretty good, decent anime and manga collection, and also run Animes and Collections and Company.
Decent.
The biggest, the bestest collector's place you can go if you're actually concerned about your collections.
The super grand grid array.
It's going to be the super grand grid rated ultra pretty soon. So when the transformation will be done, the ultra is going to be the ultimate. So
Nice.
What about you, Brandon? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I'm SeptumSin of SeptumSin versus the World. We do our dedications to physical media there, pickups, news, occasional reviews, and the whatnot. Of course, we've lit up this week a little bit because of unforeseen circumstances. But we do have a couple things coming up. I have pre-recorded stuff that's going to be showing up. Part 2 of the playthrough of Alan Wake. We did about 5 parts before we were like, okay, well, we'll stop there. But part 2 with me and my wife doing commentary on it, and I have a collection video on Friday where I show off my entire PS4/PS5 collection, which will be exciting.
nice.
On the other side, I work with Inside Movies Galore and Delusions of Grandeur as try and help organize things, get things going, StreamYard when occasion. And this time around, we're going to continue our Meet the Cast month. Matter of fact, our final Meet the Cast with Dustin's picks, or sort of picks. We have a movie called Aberration as a start, which is one that I've been told he's very fond of, and another movie that we know that he has come to love, called Anaconda.
Oh, the Jennifer Lopez one?
Yeah,
Yep.
Haven't seen that in years.
Ice Cube.
So we get some giant snake action going in there, and
Giant
Come back to us, Dustin. I'll be your waifu. Like, seriously.
So with luck, maybe he'll come back with
something tells me that Mo is a big fan of giant snake action.
Hey,
All
man,
right.
we like what we like. You know.
Alrighty. Going over to Jake, When Nature Calls. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right. I'm Jake. I'm co-host on SeptumSin versus the World, where, like you said, we do a lot of fun stuff. Last week, I believe, was our discussion on Death Parade, which was a nice discussion. We had some good times with that. Of course, we're got Beck coming up this month, and we're also working towards our awards show to the end of for the 2020 films. So some fun stuff going on there, and come on the show and hang out with you guys. And
yeah,
it's good times.
Due at the end of the month, so we're going to do some voting done soon.
Yeah. All right.
Alrighty, and believe that's everybody. So my name is David Streggy. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you and welcome, and hopefully you enjoyed our film journeys tonight. Definitely looking forward to the next two films in the journey. So come back with us next week, and we'll be sure to give you a big snake-eyed welcome. So
absolutely. And just remember to stay alive and keep breathing, because tomorrow the sun will rise. Who knows what the tide will bring?
I also
Indeed.
moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where I go on about my own video pickups and video reviews. So check those out as well. So let's give a big round of applause for Dane. And
Yeah.
we'll cast that anchor out and set sail for another moon.
Time to
All right.
shove off, mateys.
Yep.
Good night,
everybody.
Good night.
Right, Jim Bob.